Recently, I was replaying Dark Souls 3 once again. Whilst the world was as stunning as always and the game as fun as always, except for maybe a few minor bumps in the road like the godforsaken Farron Keep. Seriously, who the hell keeps waving these areas through? Oh, yep, that's poison and constant health deterioration. Oh, yep, these are super fast and insanely strong enemies all over the place. Yep. Oh, and you're super slow and basically can't dodge in the swamp. Yep, I realized something. I love fighting the bosses in this game in particular. Wow, what a deduction. In a game with a pretty big focus on boss fights, I like fighting them. Give me my medal already. Even the arguably tougher ones like Nameless King are always fun to me, and the parts I look forward for the most in these games. I mean, sure, even now on my fourth time through, it still took me more than a handful of attempts to beat the guy, but I was genuinely enjoying the time spent attempting to beat him without it feeling like chores. I was actually in a call with a close friend of mine was trying to beat our favorite Nameless King, and because I was moving stuff around in my room at the time, blah blah, and changing the setup a bit to be more comfortable, I was using some shitty ass wired headphones to call instead of the absolutely beautifully engineered and crafted device in front of me right now. And since that headphone mic was probably never made with the intention in mind that someone would actually be willing to use it to actually communicate, and more of a thing they could list on their weird-ass Amazon page that consists solely of keywords no one actually gives a shit about, it picked up absolutely every noise and crammed it out with the worst possible quality ever. That of course means it also picked up my controller sounds every time I went and pressed the buttons, because you know, a epic gamer moment, pressing all the buttons and hopping on the sticks all the time. And since me and my friend are both into rhythm games, and she could only hear the sounds my controller made, she asked me what kind of song I was playing in that instance. Which left me confused because I was honestly at a loss that someone could even deduct what kind of game one is playing based on the sounds you make whilst playing the game. I mean, what kind of a psychopath do you have to be? I mean, the controller sounds, I mean. Now, of course, that's only talking about the sounds of buttons on the gamepad. That has nothing to do really with any of what we're going to be talking about in this video. It was just a happy, nice, fun fact that serves as a bridge over into the main topic. Because whilst reaching this flow state that is so incredibly fun and mesmerizing to me as I simply dodge everything a boss throws at me flawlessly, I realized something. These boss fights have a lot in common with such rhythm games. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not opting for some new rhythm Souls-like game or whatever, seeing as just about anything after Elden Ring's success needs to be a Souls-like nowadays. I just want to talk about the similarities which arise between these two games. And with this horrible introduction done and dusted, let's get into the meat of my thoughts. Let's start by laying down some groundwork. To play a game, you need to have it installed on your computer. To function properly, a computer requires a motherboard, adequate airflow, a processor, not that much. Let's talk about rhythm games first. Rhythm games, of course, being a fusion of the two words rhythm and game. A rhythm is a strong, regular, repeated pattern of movement or sound, or the measured flow of words and phrases in verse or prose, as determined by the relation of long and short or stressed and unstressed syllables. Make of that what you will. So basically we have something happening, and that happens on a regular basis, like how the button prompts appear in rhythm games, which lets us move on to the game part. A game is a game basically boiling down to pressing buttons which cause a response on screen, in very, very, very basic terms. Now we can combine the two. We have a rhythm of prompts showing up on screen, and we respond to these by pressing the corresponding button on our gamepad of choice, ranging all the way from casual input devices to absolute fucking insanity. The things Souls-like fans will do, I'm not even joking at this point. Shout out to this guy playing Dark Souls 3 with fucking potatoes for some fucking reason. Anyway, but that's very basic. And it'd be quite boring if a rhythm game basically revolved around a screen with button prompts on them occasionally showing up and me just having to press a button at the correct time. That's even worse than pretending to be playing a game as a kid when the controller wasn't actually plugged in. So the rhythm can change its pace and form. Depending on the song, or specifically the part of the song, the button prompt appear speed, or BPAS for short, ranges all the way from a stroll in the park to a fucking machine gun. But as stated, the form can change as well. Depending on what you're currently playing, the game may require you to do one of the following. Hold a button, press a different button in a specific direction, press multiple buttons at once, somehow press all your buttons in your house all at once and hold them without a set keybind to do so. And ideally this is all accompanied by a perfect musical undertone. Now if we convert this to Dark Souls, we also have a perfect musical undertone. But what do we also do whilst fighting our favorite bosses? That's right, we press our buttons, woohoo! And ideally not chuck the controller out the window after trying to fucking freeze it for the 100th time. Please just fucking let me leave. I want to be done. So yes, indeed we press buttons in Dark Souls, because it's a game going off of the definition that Dumbass made earlier. Alright, but have you ever noticed how during combos the bosses have a set pace between their moves that sometimes deviates but mostly stays the same, that allows you to enter that flow state of just continuously dodging and having a brain expansion moment as you outplay that big old dude in armor? Wait, could that be a rhythm in this economy? Okay, so in Dark Souls is a little different, but still pretty similar. Before attacking, the boss swings his weapon a little. That's what Dark Souls scientists like me call a tell, because it tells you that if you don't dodge properly, you're pancakes. In rhythm games you have a similar thing where the tell is basically just the button prompt appearing on screen telling you to press the indicated button. There are also other types of tells, like audio tells, which are mostly used for initiating combos. And in a rhythm game that would be the actual music playing in the background, as the buttons you press will correspond to the sound of the song, as you're likely recreating the rhythm parts of that set song with your masterful button presses. Or other forms of visual tells, like watching out for what direction Frida shoots her eyes from, so you can actually tell where she's hiding during her invisible stage and not get sliced to death. But whatever attack follows such a tell can also deviate. Perhaps it's a combo slow enough for you to get a hit in between. Maybe it requires you to think carefully about where you dodge to so you don't catch some shit anyway. This tell basically rounds down to the equivalent of your button prompt in this game, only with the small addition of decision making, because in a rhythm game you can only press set button. Either that or you lose your combo. In Dark Souls you can also simply not dodge an attack while he's mid-fucking swing, preying on instability damage to stagger him so you don't get offed. And that's where it gets exciting. Roll or attack? Roll or attack? It gets even more complex once we start factoring in the change in risk versus reward, thinking about our health pool and defenses. What attacks are able to instantly kill us and should be watched out for? Additionally, managing our stamina is something we have to keep in mind. If we go overboard with punishing, we might run out and get stuck in a combo with no way to minimize the incoming damage, since we can't roll or shield any of it. But we also need to always dive into the risk of having to dodge a flurry of attacks whilst punishing. This is really only the surface level of all of these factors that come in and shape this beautifully intricate boss design that is only really apparent in these games. It works even better when we can tell how to dodge an attack by simply its tell, because it's made in such a way that we can foresee how the attack will play out, or at least have the ability to get them down relatively quickly. Like how you can easily tell which direction Lorian's swings will go, and their speed, and how to dodge them. Or you eventually realize what he will be up to once he teleports. Feels like I'm actually having a duel to the death with my opponent in this game that somehow turns from two nobodies fighting over nothing at the end of everything to a freshly married couple dancing with each other on the beach during their honeymoon. Only they are holding weapons and the beach is not made out of sand, but exists purely out of dunes of ash. Are there bosses or enemies that don't necessarily work this way? Yeah. Take the old Demon King for example. Or bosses that have issues which go down other avenues, like the King of the Storm phase of the Nameless King, because the dragon is simply way too big, and whether you use the target lock or the free cam, you will likely always have an impaired vision. This gets extremely annoying if he decides to do his flying up and spring fire attack, but if you accidentally don't run through underneath him and in the opposite direction of his flying, and instead run along with him, you'll end up worse than well done. But you can't actually see where he's flying because it's difficult to track his movements due to his size. Not to mention that free cam is an absolute nightmare to use on the controller because of how you have to bend your index finger over onto the stick. But where exactly does the thrill come from during these fights? Because you don't really have anything to lose. You're likely going into the fog gate with a diminishable soul balance, if not 0 souls. And there's likely a relatively safe and fast way back to the foggy gate. Well, it comes from the difficulty. But it's not some Super Mario boss where you only have to hit the guy like 3 times and then he dies. No. You have to hit them a bunch of times. And remember, if the boss is done right, lashing out a hit is either you taking in a risk of taking damage yourself, or you having dodged and attacked flawlessly. Another thing rhythm games and Dark Souls in particular have in common is this little bar at the bottom. People who think negatively may call it the boss bar, but I prefer to call it the progress bar instead, because it shows how much longer you have to play the song, or in this case how many more times you need to hit your foe until you get the big banner saying some corny shit. In fact, most bosses are similar to an average song lengthwise, about 3 to 5 minutes if done correctly. Both require constant focus and flawless gameplay to achieve the desired result. The perfect result in a rhythm game would be getting a perfect streak where you press every button prompt correctly and at the perfect timing. In Dark Souls it's practically the same, because the end goal is to beat the boss you're facing, but that requires you to make the correct decisions again and again for an extended period of time, in turn forcing you to dodge, attack and manage your stamina perfectly. In both games you're allowed to make some mistakes, sure, but too many and you're done for. And both games are about perfecting your craft. You might try the same song over and over again to improve your score, similarly to how you may have to try a boss multiple times until it works out, or even fight them again with a different build on a different playthrough or on New Game Plus. Because the bosses end up being so exciting and actually fun that you want to play them again. This is not some boring stuff where you throw a harpoon at some whale repeatedly pressing the same buttons for 2 minutes and occasionally shift sides. You want to prove to yourself you're capable of doing something difficult. And when they finally go down, it's not the gained souls or made progress that clicks your buttons. It's that feeling of I beat them, similarly to the rush you have and how tense it gets when you're on course to beating a song perfectly. The reason why I think this works so well in Dark Souls 3 in particular is because everything plays ball together so well. Bosses are fast but predictable. Comparably, in Dark Souls 1 you were genuinely too slow and most attacks too weird for you to properly roll them, so it was more about positioning most of the time. Dark Souls 2 has a similar problem with its crooked rolling system, but genuinely manages it a lot better than the original. And Elden Ring, well, Elden Ring has some bosses that genuinely strike the same vein as Dark Souls 3, but most of them do revolve around simply memorizing the whole moveset down to the core instead of being able to intuitively fight a boss due to delayed attacks, frame traps, an abundance of AoE attacks and just way too little openings. I left out Bloodborne for a reason. Because in Bloodborne, our favorite man with glasses handed us a gun. And you know what you can do with a gun? Shoot the 35th President of the United States. Parry. Which was a thing before, but I feel also is relevant if we're on the topic of rhythms. Parrying is the overlord of risk versus reward. You leave yourself open to massive counter damage, but also take a chance at dealing a fatal blow to your foe. And this is where it gets interesting, because the timing for a parry is very specific. And I swear to God, every time I pull off a successful parry in these games, I see a little perfect message pop up in my head. Because guess what? It's the same thing again. To hit a parry, you need to practically imagine your enemy swing from the tail to the actual impact like that little arrow flying towards the bottom line in Project Diva, and then press at the exact time it crosses. The speed will be variable from enemy to enemy and attack to attack, but so are the nodes in the Rythm game. Both games are indeed quite similar in the structure. And now let me have this little excursion in their philosophical themes. How exactly? Well, in Dark Souls you have nothing and you strive for everything. You make your own purpose, you create an essence out of your existence, which varies from player to player. Some just want to beat the game using any possible help they can get. Some play with self-imposed rules, like not using summons. Some go out of their way to keep the game challenging by not intentionally overleveling their characters or weapons, while some others go all out and play the game using potatoes. And the Rythm game is similar, because those games have no real purpose either. We make that purpose ourselves. Beating a song on a specific difficulty, going for perfect runs, challenging ourselves by playing with our toes. Wait, I'm not showing that. But at the end of the day, this is all really just a metaphorical and completely useless way of thinking that sprung from a random call one night. Which fits the topic, because in life, whatever we do is kind of meaningless and we'll die anyway. What the fuck am I even talking about at this point? If you're actually still listening to my voice and have been listening to my ramblings for the past few minutes, then thank you. That really does mean the world to me, and I want you to have a good one. Good things are headed your way, and that's not a slogan for an ad about chocolate bars that will Good things are headed your way, and that's not a slogan for an ad about chocolate bars that will totally ruin your health. Good things are headed your way, and that's not a slogan for an ad about chocolate bars that will totally ruin your health. Well, that's done.